Reverence for life affords me my fundamental principle of morality, namely that good exists in maintaining, assisting and enhancing life, and that to destroy, harm or to hinder life is evil. Affirmation of the world, that is, affirmation of the will to live, which appears in phenomenal forms all around me, is only possible for me in that I give myself out for other life. And that quote comes from Albert Schweitzer. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. Well, the world is certainly changing in a very rapid fashion these days, folks. Cameras being put up here in this quiet town of Byron Bay that I live in. Of course, this is because we have a new Nazi police chief who's just moved up here from Sydney, who thinks that the Byron Bay people have it a little bit too easy, and he wishes to change all of that. We have the reports of the United States government announcing that they're going to put drones in the air over the country and that these drones will be armed. So this, of course, takes humanity out of the equation. And folks, I wouldn't be surprised if this sort of thing leads to the deployment of the Talon robots for crowd control in the future, which will again take any human decision-making out of the equation and completely remove empathy from any interaction between the authorities and crowds at any protest or any rally. And it's absolutely phenomenal, really, when you look at the America of today and how vastly different it is from anything that represents American values or American traditions. America really is being turned into a high-tech version of Nazi Germany. And standing back from outside America, it really is amazing to see when you look at America and see what's being done there. And one of the most amazing parts about it is the people within the country just don't seem to see it. They're all distracted by the television and by the ball game and by running on the treadmill in order to keep their heads above the ever-rising pool of self-generating debt that they're forced to live in. And so they just don't notice what's going on around them. And yet, standing outside the country and looking in, it's very, very obvious for the rest of the world to see. It's interesting, actually, talking to American travellers, because many of them are quite amazed at the way the world views their country, because they never see it from within their country. A lot of Americans have always perceived themselves to be the healers of the world because of what they're taught by the television. But really, when you look at it from the outside, America is the hand of the New World Order. It's the military arm of the New World Order that's being used to go out and basically take over the rest of the world through hostile corporate takeovers. And that's all war is, folks. It's simply hostile takeovers. It's a consolidating of the global corporation that's run out of Europe that uses America as its military arm. But of course, the people within America don't believe this. They don't know this. They think that America is the home of the brave and the land of the free, and that America is what their television has taught them that it is. When, of course, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, American people are kept almost childlike in their understanding of reality. I love the American people, I really do. I think they're wonderful people, but I have huge problems with the American government because I don't think the American government has anything to do with freedom, anything to do with what is good about America, and has complete and utter disregard for the American people. But again, due to the lack of trivium and quadrivium and the way the education system has been manipulated by the government, the American people have been kept in an almost childlike state, almost adolescent culture. Even when Americans grow up, they never really seem to leave adolescence. And because of their understanding of the language, they have a very, very narrow understanding of the world. And please understand that I'm not attempting to say anything bad about American people here. As I said, I love the American people. And there are a lot of highly intelligent people within America who know everything that I'm saying, who are also working to help wake up the rest of the country. But really looking at it from an outside perspective, it is truly fascinating to see how childlike and adolescent the entire American culture actually is. And as I just mentioned, folks, a lot of this is due to people's understanding of the language and the fact that they have a left brain education, so they're trained to only think in language. So their understanding of reality is based entirely upon their understanding of the language. If they can't understand the language that they speak, then how well are they ever going to understand reality? Plus, they're not even going to be looking at reality from an artistic sense or from a right brain perspective, from an energetic perspective, because they're not trained to think with their right brain, and all of the stuff that they're taught in their left brain education basically is done to close off the right brain and to make people think that it's all mumbo jumbo, it's all new age, or it's all rubbishy stuff. You can't talk about energy, you need to talk about science and mathematics, and it's all analytical, and that's the way they're trained to think. And it's actually very interesting, folks, to know how much people are controlled by their language. Actually, I was speaking to someone who was here the other day, an Italian man who came to visit me, and he was talking about what's been done in Italy since the introduction of television. And he said to me that around Italy there used to be all sorts of regional dialects, okay, and there was all these different words and different ways of saying things to explain reality, and people had a very, very connected view of reality. And then television came in, and they started telling people on television that there's only one way to speak Italian, and if you speak any other way than this way, then you're a lesser person. That's basically the attitude that the television was having, and it got all of those regional dialects to change into the one dialect. And in doing so, much of the connection to reality and much of the way people used to interact with each other was taken from them, because those words were basically removed from the language. And of course, folks, if you stop using certain words, then over a period of 2 or 3 generations, those words get lost. And then they're gone forever. And so that understanding of reality is gone forever. And they appear to be doing this in many countries around the world. As soon as television comes in, they start containing the regional dialects and turning it all into one dialect. And then what they do is they come along and they superimpose English over that. So no matter what your dialect is, you will be learning to speak English as well through your education system. And then when you look at English, English has been greatly modified into American, which simply doesn't even pronounce English the correct way anymore. Americans speak American. They speak with an American accent, and it's nothing like the Queen's English. I mean, English people speak English. British people speak English. But the world is not being taught to speak actual English anymore. They're being taught to speak with an American accent. So they're completely changing the harmonic resonances, and they're completely changing the language. They're merging the whole world with an Americanized version of the English language. And really, when you look at it, folks, you look at the way the English language is constructed, the English language itself is bad enough, let alone now reducing it to the Americanized version of the English language, because what that does is it removes all of the warm frequencies from the language, all of the active frequencies from the language, and it turns it into this Americanized version of it. And it's quite easy to do, because to many people the American language is quite attractive because it's been presented as attractive through Hollywood. When you watch a Hollywood movie, that's the way a lot of people learn to speak English in other countries. They learn from watching the television, and so what they're actually learning isn't English, it's American. And the words that the American people use are English words, and so that limits their understanding of reality right from the beginning, the same as all English-speaking people. But then the American accent takes all of those warm frequencies out of the language and, again, morphs it into something else. So you've got to understand America was set up as the military arm and set up as the controlling arm that will go out and do the New World Order's bidding and take over the world the way they wanted to do it, the way they always had it planned. And this is being done both militarily, and it's being done with what would be termed silent weapons, which is things such as the modification of the language, things such as the television, things such as the electromagnetic waves and the GMO food and the chemtrails and all the other things that they're doing to control people. But essentially, what television has done and what the American culture has managed to do is go out and superimpose itself over all the other cultures in the world. And this has been able to be achieved via the use of television. Well, that's what television is for, folks. And they've done it through the Hollywood idea of reality, all this bright lights and glitz and big explosions and bangs and everything's larger than life, and it's this world that is bigger than the world and more real than the world. It's exciting and everybody wants to participate in it, and so they all get sucked into the television and they all lose track of their own lives, and yet all of it contains subtext which trains people what to think. Not how to think, but what to think. But they don't notice because they're off in another world, and they're all kept entertained so that they're not noticing what's happening around them. They don't ever question the fact that their lives are spent on a treadmill of debt, collecting stuff in order to improve their social status. They think it's all real. They don't understand what's going on. They cannot see the open-air prison that they're living in. They can't see the fact that they're not free, they're just free range. And it's really bizarre because they don't notice how bad their lives are, because the lives of the people on the television are all good. They're all having normal lives and happy lives, and it's all perfect and it's all funny or it's exciting, and so they live that life instead of living their own. And now this is being superimposed right across the globe. And through this process, everybody is becoming more and more disconnected from reality. And that's how it's been done. And again, folks, a lot of this has been achieved through their manipulation of language, because they take certain words out of the language and they close off the regional dialects and they mould it all into one, then they superimpose English over the top. And this was spoken about in books such as 1984, where they suggested that if you took any word that related to something like freedom out of the language, then even the people who operated within the workforce, though they may want to be free, they would have no way of conveying that information to each other. They just knew that the world wasn't the way it was supposed to be. They knew that there was something wrong with the world and that things should be different, but they didn't know what that was because they didn't have those words in their language, and so they had no real way of even understanding what the concept of freedom was. And so, of course, it was very difficult to explain the concept to someone else. And folks, when you really look at this, you can see how this can be now applied to modern reality because of the way it was applied in the book and the way they manipulated the people into not understanding what freedom was. Because their understanding of reality was based on their understanding of the language, and they didn't have those words related to freedom anywhere within the language. They'd been removed. And this is what's been going on, folks. We've had so many words removed from our language over time. And by cancelling out regional dialects and turning it all into one formulated version of reality and then merging that with English, we've lost our connection to reality. We don't know how to describe those things that we feel. That connection that we feel to the world around us. We can write whole books trying to explain to people what this means, when really we should have a word for it. And it would be a word that everybody understood. I often use the word Dharma to explain this to people. Dharma is an amazing concept. Dharma is about finding your perfect place within the cosmic machine so that the cosmic machine functions perfectly. The concept of Dharma explains that how to find this path is to follow the 4 rules of Dharma, namely doing the right thing in the right way at the right time for the right reason. And again, you could write an entire book explaining this concept to people, and yet if you're speaking Hindi, all you have to do is say Dharma, and they know exactly what you mean. It's an entirely new concept of life, an entirely different perspective of reality. And we have had these things taken from our language. And also the very structure of the English language. It's a very mechanical language. It stops and starts all the time. You'll notice if you listen to someone speak Italian or many other languages that aren't of Germanic descent, then it's a very fluid language. It's almost like you're speaking one word. In many native tongues, it's just a complete continuation of syllables because there's many joining words that link other words together and create a very fluid language and therefore a more fluid understanding of reality. But we don't have that in English. It's all start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Each word is completely separate from all the other words. So this again makes the language more mechanical and pushes people further into their left brain.